I now call to order the MWPA Executive Committee meeting of March 7, 2024. Welcome. Roll call. Martina, please call the roll to ensure we have a quorum present.
Certainly, starting with Bruce Goings,
Here.
Catherine Hilliard,
Here.
Rachel Kurtz,
Here.
Dennis Rodoni,
Here.
and Julie McMillan.
Here.
And it looks like we have all members present.
Thank you. Number 3, agenda adjustments. I will now entertain requests to adjust the order of the agenda. Seeing none. Number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when not reporting out. Martina, are there any public comment?
I see no hands for comment at this time.
Great. Is Megan on the line?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Number 5, Executive Officers Report. Mark Brown will present the Executive Officers Report. Mark.
Good morning, everybody. And as a reminder, March is Women's History Month. I'll dig in a little bit deeper at the board meeting, but what I would just offer right now is let's reflect on the amazing, intelligent, and talented women that have been part of MWPA, whether they were on the board or they were employees or contractors or people that were involved in the creation of the GPA. I think it's important that we acknowledge that, and we are where we're at because of the strong and talented women that have been involved with us. Work plan development, that's our fire season for the Marin Wildfire. And it has been going full force ahead. And what I shared with the finance committee, and I'll share with you, is that last year I kind of bragged about how much energy the member agencies put into creating a fantastic work plan. And I feel like that momentum has increased this year. And I have also sensed a paradigm shift when it comes to the collaboration across jurisdictional boundaries. I see people looking at the whole of the MWPA more so than they have in the past, rather than just their zones or just their member agencies. So we're super excited about that. We had our advisory technical committee meeting yesterday to go through the JPA-wide project proposals and budget, and that'll be going to operations next week. And then that's when we start digging into the specific projects within each zone. And so we're definitely on track timing wise to meet our goal of bringing you guys a complete package in May. The finance committee met earlier this week. This is an intensive week for us. We had 3 meetings in a row, but very productive. This is where we lined out the budget framework for 24-25. And just a quick note, as of December, CPI for the San Francisco Bay Area was trending at 2.6% with a downward trend. So we're going on the conservative side. March 13th, I think, is when they announced the February to February CPI, or the 12th. And that's what the ordinance says we have to follow. And so we're going on the conservative side, and we're estimating a 2% CPI when we projected our revenue for 24-25. If it comes in higher than that, then we will adjust our budget up. We rather would adjust up rather than adjust down. Just so you know, we have a meeting on the calendar for our JPA revision, our GPA language revision. That subcommittee will be meeting next week. We were able to provide the ad hoc subcommittee a draft with the red line changes, and also with context to each of the changes and a little bit of why behind each of those changes. So I feel like a 1 hour meeting scheduled for that should suffice, especially with the expertise that we had behind that. And I'll share the names again with you. Matthew Heinmel, Dan Eilerman, Dan Schwartz, Jason Weber were the primary drivers. And then we had Stephen Robb take a look at it, who was one of the primary authors of the original language. And he had a lot of the why behind why the language was written. So I think we have a quality package to bring to you guys. I'm looking forward to next week. I will be presenting to ESP about the intersection of climate change and some of the recent wildfires over the last several years, not just in the United States, but looking at Canada and other areas, and how whether or not climate change is impacting wildfire. And we know it is, but not all of the disastrous fires that we have been seeing are primarily driven by climate change. So we're going to dig into that and make sure that we're putting the climate change tag on the appropriate fires and for the appropriate reasons. Stanford, we continue to have a great relationship with Stanford. They asked me to come and lecture to one of their classes. It was a tremendous engagement with the class. It's as if you remember that we were able to create a partnership with Stanford where they're writing the MWPA story, right? And they've done chapter 1 and chapter 2, and they're starting to engage on chapter 3. Chapter 3, they're really digging into our grant program. And part of what they do is they don't just dig into it and tell the story, but through their academia, they also make some recommendations on how perhaps we can improve our grant program. So that was exciting. I was able to sit down and have lunch with some of their staff members or our faculty members, and they continue to want to explore on how we can expand that partnership. And one of the key areas I expressed where we would like to expand that partnership is in looking for solutions for the insurance challenge for homeowners insurance. And pleased to announce that we closed our recruitment for our senior wildfire mitigation specialist. And we have 25 qualified applicants that are moving forward for 2 positions, and super happy about that. And we will be interviewing, they're going through a screening process now, and we'll be interviewing March 25th for that position. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions? Catherine.
I've seen the list. There's probably a 50-50 blend.
Anybody else? Bruce?
I just want to comment on Women's History Month. The MWPA shaded fuel break for Novato is occurring in my neighborhood currently. I followed the van up the hill yesterday morning after my swim. I didn't know they were there, and the crew was predominantly female, and there's a lot of ethnic diversity also. So, and I saw some of the work that they're doing, and I wouldn't want to do it. It is hard work, phenomenal work. They're pulling broom and bunching it and then pulling it to the road and chipping. It's just an astounding work. But we're grooming some female ecologists here is what I see.
I had a question about the Stanford project, Mark. Is Michael Wara involved in that?
For the story of Marin Wildfire, no, he's not involved in that. But Michael Wara has been side by side with us as we explore insurance solutions. In fact, Gene Bonander, Mark Northcross, and I met with Michael last week, and we have another meeting on the calendar to continue to explore action items that we can partner with. And Michael intends to engage some of his students, which are different than the students I lectured with, in creating a solution for us.
Thank you. Public comment on this item. Martina, is there anybody seeking to make a statement, question?
I see no hands for comment at this time.
Bringing this item back to the committee for any discussion? Thank you, Mark. Number 6, consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. There's only one item on the consent calendar. Is there any public comment, Martina, on the consent calendar?
There are no hands for comment at this time.
I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar unless someone wants to pull the item.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Catherine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Number 7, discussion items, data-driven wildfire risk framework. Charlotte Jourdain will present the staff report on this item. Charlotte.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Charlotte Jourdain, and I'm an independent contractor for Marin Wildfire. I am here to provide you with an introduction to what will be an update from Willow Labs on the March 21st board meeting. Your board previously, your board, sorry. Excuse me, your board previously requested that we provide context and a little bit more of an explanation around the efforts that we are seeking to quantify risk. We speak a lot about modeling risk also. So I'd like to present a few slides and I welcome your feedback as to how to best frame this presentation by Willow Lab. I want to recognize that you have not seen the presentation. The ATC and Ops Committee have seen it last month. It was very well received. So bear with me as I try to introduce something, and provide context on something that you have not yet seen, but I'll do my best here. So I want to start by calling on your board's approval of a core value for Marin Wildfire, which is to be guided by science. And I've copied the value here, emphasizing that this seeks to use the best available science and technology field experience to achieve meaningful and measurable wildfire hazard reduction. And the last part of this is that we recognize that our work will adapt. I think this is very important. We are in a very fast-changing environment when it comes to wildfire simulation, modeling, quantifying, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of activities out there in terms of technology and innovation, both in the academic field, but also by practitioners. So from there, I want to go back and talk for a second about why we need to quantify risk. The main reason is because it really is a key measure to understanding prevention and preparedness, which is our organization's mission. Quantifying risk allows us to prioritize our mitigation efforts. It allows us to better design better projects and programs by understanding the nature of the risk, the location of the risk, the populations and the communities affected by that specific type of risk, understanding the limitation of possible mitigation efforts, and how we can address any residual risks. So the typical example is a fuel break project might do a great job at limiting risk, but it might not completely take care of it. And we have to complement it with education and outreach efforts to best prepare the population or the communities that might be affected by any residual risk. We also want to track progress over time. We want to show how we have our efforts have contributed to creating a more fire-adapted environment. We want to use quantified risk or data to communicate with residents and stakeholders. This has been already very powerful for the evacuation risk assessment, for example, to be able to show people on a map, this is what you're looking at, this is the risk that we think exists in your communities. And I want to emphasize this always takes place together with field experience. It's not that we're going to rely on data in the abstract, but just know that all data that we present and that we, accept as outcomes of our work is always vetted by field work. And then finally, I think it's very important to also emphasize that quantifying risk helps us provide evidence for grant-seeking efforts. I'm speaking of MWPA seeking external grant funds, not other grant funds that we give to our residents. So let's talk about who's helping us quantify risk. So for goal 1, our vegetation management efforts, at this point, it's mostly Willow Labs, and they're using, they're quantifying, obviously, fire and fuel risk. For goal 2, our evacuation and alerting goal, it's Sonoma Technology and their team of subcontractors, and they quantify 3 types of risk for this work: fire and fuels, traffic risk, and communication risk. So one feeds into the other, and that's how we can determine what the best outcomes of an evacuation planning effort should be. I put goal number 4 here because I think it's important to also, speak about how we use surveys and other qualitative data, including our own wildfire risk perception survey, to understand how the population perceives risk. And then finally, for goal number 5, that's our defensible space and home hardening goal. We rely on Willow Labs to quantify and assess risk based on defensible space findings and home hardening findings. And this also informs our grants goal. So I hope that gives a little bit of an overview. Now, let's talk about modeling. So we know who does what for which goal. Talk about modeling for a second. I want to be very clear that Marin Wildfire does not pay for anyone to develop any new fire behavior model. We don't do that. That's research and development that takes place in the academic setting, and that's not something that we do. We ask our partners, our vendors, Willow Labs, Sonoma Technology, and so on, to help us quantify and assess hazards using existing, vetted, and approved fire and fuel models to quantify risk. So, for example, goal number 1, vegetation management. Like I said, at this point, we're working with Willow Labs. Scott Farley uses Flam Map, which is the go-to standard. It's used on all the incidents and CAL FIRE projections for fire and fuel. And then going forward next fiscal year, you'll hear a lot about fire pathways. And that is also something Willow Labs is licensed to do for us. You need a license to do that. It's not free for all. And he uses a combination of Flam Map and the minimum travel model. Again, those are existing models. We don't develop those. We take them and we feed it our data and our specific characteristics here to tell us what the risk should be. For the evacuation risk, the fire and fuel is modeled using Elm Fire. That's the Pyrogens model. It's I wouldn't call it up and coming. It's established, but it's a very strong, very good model that's came out of UC Berkeley. For the traffic risk, we use the Transportation Authority of Marin Traffic Demand Model. And for the communication risk, there's no model to model risk related to human behavior and communication. All we do there is just assess the risk. We know we have elderly populations here and, population with difficulty surrounding transportation there. We give it a risk weight, if you will, but we're not modeling any sort of simulation of what could happen around the lack of communication or the inability to get alerts. We're just sort of giving it a value, if you will. It's not a modeling exercise. Now I want to move to goal number 5, the on-parcel risk. Here, like I said, the risk is being quantified or assessed using defensible space and home hardening findings. Again, we are giving findings a risk value, an assessment, but here's the tricky part. There is no model out there that models structures to structure propagation in the built environment. In fact, the Elm Fire model and the Flame Map model those are wildland fire models. They don't apply to the built environment. And it's a huge question mark out there. How do we model transition from the wildlands to the built environment? There's no off-the-shelf model that we can take and say, okay, here, let's give it our data and see what it says. It doesn't exist. We don't have that. So we're not developing it ourselves, but we're also sort of seeking the best way to, make sure our risk assessment are correct, right? So we have started a pilot project with Colorado State. That is one of 2 organizations that does have a structure-to-structure fire propagation model. It's extremely fascinating to see the results that model's been applied to the Lahaina fire, to the Camp Fire, to a lot of other fires, and essentially comparing what the model says about which structure will burn and which one will not, and then looking at what actually happened in reality. And the match is about anywhere between 60 and 80%. So that's those are very strong numbers. They're very sort of promising, but they're not commercialized. They're still, in the university sort of environment. So we're working with them, piloting and seeing how our data could be used to apply to these models. But just want to emphasize again that there's nothing existing off the shelf that we can use. So the presentation that you'll hear on the 21st it's going to be Willow Labs presenting, and so he'll present on his efforts to quantify risk for us on vegetation management and on parcel risk. And then you can hear from him, but I hope this provides a little bit of an overview and a little bit of a distinction about what we're doing and what we're not doing regarding wildfire risk. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions?
I have one.
Yes, Bruce.
Amazing, thank you. The elm fire, that's a term that's new to me. And I know that Regents was the group of the A team, the who's who of modeling, who they took some old approaches and look at them and update them. Can you just give us a 2-minute description of Regents and what it is? And you said it's new, but this is the first I've seen elm fire. I'm fascinated. I know that it's the best of the best, but just
Elm Fire is the name of the Pyrogens model.
okay.
So I don't have more details at this point, but I can certainly include some on the 21st, if you will.
Okay, no, that's I think that's fine. Never mind. This is great. Thank you.
If I can add a little bit about modeling, one thing that that's been pounded into my head for years, probably decades, all models are wrong. And then you take the model and compare to what's happening in reality. For most of my fire career, we only had one model to follow. Now, through academia and through private industry, we're developing half a dozen, if not dozens of models. And as Charlotte pointed out, we're finally starting to get a model of home-to-home spread. The original attempt for home-to-home spread, by the way, was to assume the grass was 15 feet tall, and they used a 15-foot tall grass model to model home-to-home spread, which obviously did not turn out to be very accurate. So where we're going with the modeling, though, is very much like weather modeling. If you listen to the meteorologist on TV, they'll talk about, well, this model says this model says that, and then they see which model is predicting more accurately for a given weather system. And we feel like we're getting to that point with wildfire modeling, that we are going to have an ensemble of models that we can use, and that our risk assessment should be agnostic to the model that we're using, and be encouraged use of multiple models and find a model that fits that environment the best. And then I'll just add as a side note, through connections of Chief Tubbs at Southern Marin Fire, we will be presenting our use of this technology as specific to dynamic risk ratings at a conference down in Southern California, a Wildfire Management Technology Summit in April 23rd and 24th. Chief Tubbs volunteered himself and then got me hooked up, and then found out he has a scheduling conflict, so I'll be doing it by myself. But I'll make sure Chief Tubbs makes it up for me. But so this is cutting edge what we're doing, and I think it's important in a lot of reasons. Number one, we don't want a fire to test our work. We would prefer not to have that occur, right? But we need to be able to show that our work is effective. And if a fire doesn't test our work, then we need to have, through validated and trustful modeling, show that our work was productive and the taxpayers can see their return on their investment. Another aspect is the grant applications and being able to show the modeling and what return on investment the grantors will receive. And we've heard complaints from the federal and state government that they have not been able to see a return on their investment. And they're frustrated by that. So if we could be an agency that shows that return on investment, that can make us more attractive. And I think one of the most important aspects of the modeling is that, to me, is one of the solutions to solving the home insurance crisis. And if we can show through validated modeling that we are decreasing annual average losses for the insurance companies, we can show that California is a good investment for the insurance industry. And that's what we have to do.
Do you have something, Rachel?
I do. I was going to just follow up on the insurance comment, but the modeling we're doing, I mean, today it's all brand new for us as well. The insurance isn't doing this level of modeling.
They are actually, and They're interested in some of the same modeling that we're partnering with. In fact, we have been having an ongoing dialogue with actuarial that works closely with the insurance industry. And it really feels, and Charlotte can correct me if I'm wrong, but it really feels like our efforts in this space are aligned, and which makes me feel really positive about the end result.
Yeah, that's correct. We have the partnership with Colorado State, which was just started a month ago, not even, that's where the actuarial firms are going. So we're happy to be there too. It's just, it's still in academia. It's not a commercialized model. Insurances are looking for catastrophic models, not risk assessments, right? There's two different things. So we're trying to move from risk assessments to a catastrophic model if we can, but there's just a lot of different dimensions that we need to take into consideration. Catastrophic models are harder to explain. They're not meant to disaggregate the risk at a smaller level of aggregation like the parcel, right? They're meant for insurances that think about risk over a very large territory because they want to balance out what that risk is. We need to be able to communicate to our residents. So as much as we'd like to go that route, and I think Mark is right, that is eventually the direction, we still need to take into consideration our own needs. We're not an insurance company. We need to communicate what the benefits of these models are as well. It's an ongoing conversation, and that's why I wanted to refer to the value statement, that this is changing literally every month in my daily life at the moment. So appreciate the patience.
Any other questions? Catherine?
So this is fluid, right? I mean, it doesn't result in a report and that's that. This is a continuous tool that we use. And so I think I asked you about intellectual rights and property. What we develop is ours, MWPA, but the models belong to the people who are providing the service. Is that correct?
100% correct.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. You said that. Thank you.
Dennis?
Thank you for the report. I just was thinking about how the public interacts with all this and what their expectations might be. This seems to be a more professional tool to me, but I think the public's going to be interested in being able to see this tool and maybe even want someone to make predictions from these tools. And I just wonder if we thought about that yet. Maybe too early. How does the public interact, or how does this work with the public, or is it purely at this point a professional tool that
So it's not just, we're not developing one single tool here. We have many different assessments across our different goals and programs. And I think what we have been focusing on at the moment is identifying the key types of information that the public is interested in hearing about, right? So, reduction in flame length, reduction in rate of spread. Just pick like 3 or 4 or 5 that are really meaningful and that help people understand why it's important to take action. There will, of course, always be people who are interested in, peeking under the hood and understanding how is this rate of spread reduction calculated, or how is it that my house is now less risky for wildfire if I, put some gutter guards there. So we'll be able to always sort of back up what the science is behind that, but I personally don't foresee these tools as being something that the public, first of all, they're extremely complex. It's not something you can just jump on and start, playing with online or something like that. So I hope that answers the question a little
But
bit.
that being said, we have the template for a dashboard to be on our website. And if you look on our website now, we have a dashboard for goals 3 and 5 that we can provide. We are in the beta phase of what goal one's dashboard will look like. And that's where the modeling translates into where the public can dig into it. One thing I also want to talk about, public versus professional, is Prop 103, which guides rate setting for insurance, demands transparency, which means currently the insurance companies can't use catastrophic risk modeling from private contractors for their risk modeling because none of them will let you peek under the hood. The modeling that we're using right now is all publicly available and publicly developed modeling. Therefore, it is transparent. And so if we can help persuade actuarials for the insurance industry and the insurance industry to use those same models, then we can be transparent and use that and be in alignment with Prop 103.
And just to clarify, those are not models, those are just risk assessments.
Correct.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Decide to do a grants program and we have it.
Mhm.
But, you know, will this help us to determine, like, if you apply for gutters as opposed to siding, as opposed to gardens, you know, will that help us to determine where we should focus our grant money?
Absolutely. In fact, when you receive a presentation for the 24-25 work plan and the changes that we're making to the grant program, you'll get our first step into this. 25-26 is where more likely we'll really start using the model data.
Thank you.
Martina, can you see if there's any public comment on this item?
I do believe we have one comment. Please bear with me. And
Hey folks, this is Stephen. As somebody who's working with Firewise communities and gets questions from our taxpayers and neighbors. One thing that I notice here in Marin is that we've got a lot of very intelligent people and computer savvy people. So the idea of modeling is pretty widespread. So I'm glad that Mark is making sure that all of this is public, because it'll help those of us who get the questions be able to answer them. And thank you. This sounds really impressive.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody else, Martina?
I see no additional hands at this time.
Great. Okay, bringing this back for any further discussion. I had a couple comments, Charlotte, when you're going to present to the board. I think it might be helpful to set out all the goals and just a little one or two sentences about what the goal is, and then maybe a couple bullet points about the contractor and what the scope of their work is, just so everyone can have all the goals and what we're doing to deal with all that. I think that might be helpful. And then the other thing that I wanted to suggest in your presentation at the beginning, when you're talking about the need to quantify risk, it's something that Mark touched on, which is that we want to continue to show that the investment of the taxpayers is being used in a prudent and positive way. And so maybe suggest adding a bullet point to capture that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Great. Thank you, Charlotte. That's very exciting.
Thank you, Charlotte.
That's great.
Number 8, Board of Directors Agenda Review, draft agenda, Mark.
As you can see, a fairly basic agenda, a few consent items that probably don't need any explanations, no critical action items at this point. And then we'll have our standard committee reports, which will you'll get a good update about ATC and operations, which are that's the important content for this meeting. And then Scott's and Charlotte's presentation will fall under the presentation item.
Questions, suggestions? Public comment, Martina, on this item?
And I see no hands for comment.
Great. Bringing it back to the committee for any further thoughts or discussion. Number 9, committee members' request for future agenda items. Anybody? Dennis?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest that maybe the chair could consider appointing an ad hoc committee to start looking at when the MWPA renewal might need to happen. I think we have 3 opportunities coming up, and I think it's important to take a look at that, talk to our member agencies, see what they have planned for those elections, and maybe even a broader outreach to some of the cities to just have a better understanding of what that field might look like so that we can make a good decision well ahead of time and when we think we want to go for the renewal. So I don't know if that could be just a executive committee, a subcommittee of the executive committee or board committee or both.
Yeah,
But I think it can be ad hoc. It doesn't have to be probably
Yeah.
an official committee, and
I
to
think
start those discussions.
that's a really good suggestion. Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else?
If I may share, when we mapped out previously what months might be good months for the board of directors to take off for meetings, April was identified as one of those months. We ended up having a meeting last April because we had the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break. But Ann and I have been discussing it, and it doesn't look like we have any critical projects that require approval for April. So tentatively, we're recommending canceling the exec committee and the board meeting for April.
Great, thank you. Number 10, adjournment. We will now adjourn the meeting, and I will see you all at the board meeting on March 21st. Great. Thank you.